I want to turn now and talk about Ilhan. Speaking of people who bring human misery, and Senator Bernie Sanders running for president, Ilhan Omar, Bernie, and cultural Marxism is what I wanted to call this segment. I want to start with the very wonderful Matt is back after vacation, and I have a clip. This is a clip from a rally in Minnesota. And in Minnesota, Bernie Sanders, Democrat senator, now running for president again, and he gave a rally. He had a rally in Minnesota. Ilhan Omar, the Democrat first-term Muslim immigrant from Somalia, Muslim refugee, Somalian Democrat, member of the U.S. Congress, gave this introduction to Bernie Sanders. And before you start it, Matt, one more thing I want to say. If you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, and on the homepage under shows, at the top of the homepage under shows, drop down list of links, there's a link to this little blurb, but it actually links to the entire presentation. It was a very long thing, but she spoke to this crowd of hysterically, exuberantly excited Minnesotans and tore down everything you can imagine about America's history. We're going to play just one little segment of her introduction, but I urge you to listen to the whole thing if you can. But here she is, Ilhan Omar, introducing Bernie Sanders.
We realize that recognition isn't about punishing our political foes, but leading within a moral obligation. I am beyond honored and excited for a president who will fight against Western imperialism.
Okay, she's introducing the man who would be president, Bernie Sanders. And I'm going to give you in a moment the other things she had to say, but I want to put it in the context of cultural Marxism in just a moment. She's introducing this guy who wants to be president by telling the audience who were hysterically on their feet cheering and clapping that she wanted to stand with Bernie Sanders because he is going to stand against Western imperialism. Other little gems from her introduction of Bernie Sanders included the argument that we need to simply welcome all refugees. If people come in caravans, they want to come to our country, we must let them in. We must welcome all refugees. No discussion of how in the world, what their status is, how in the world we're going to actually assimilate them, how in the world we're going to provide them a path forward in America, except, of course, becoming recipients of welfare. No discussion of what citizenship standards they, if any, may apply. No notion of what the refugee law says and whether any of these people who want to cross our border meet the refugee standards in law. It was basically, if they want to come here, they can come. She also talked about basing America's foreign policy on an understanding of universal rights. She never defined that term, but she used it over and over and over, universal rights, which basically, I'm going to tell you folks, means anything the left wants to do is going to be described as a universal right. She talked about free health care for all as a basic human universal right. And I'm telling you, everything she said, they were on their feet chanting and clapping and cheering and waving Bernie signs. The idea that free health care for everybody is a right. The last thing I'll tell you that she mentioned, and I really do encourage you to go listen to the introduction yourself. I mean, it will be upsetting, but I'm getting at the idea, this is not someone ranting, and she was ranting and raving like a left-wing lunatic, but they had an enormous venue packed to the gills and people exuberantly excited on their feet, screaming and cheering. The last specific I want to give you that she had to say that I just found very troubling, and I think all of us should really take serious pause and think about, is you know how when there are Trump rallies and sometimes people will kind of because of something he's saying or some issue he's discussing, they'll almost spontaneously go into a chant of USA, USA. They're cheering for America. You know what they were chanting at Bernie Sanders' conference, his big event? Led by Ilhan Omar? Green New Deal. Green New Deal. We've talked about that in the show. The Green New Deal has almost nothing to do with the environment. It's given the name green because then you get a whole bunch of leftists going, oh, yeah, green, I'm green, I love green. The Green New Deal is, and you need to read it yourself if you doubt an iota what I'm telling you, the Green New Deal is simply the communist takeover of America. It is nothing less. It is a complete control over America's economy, over every aspect of American life. It is a control over housing, control over income, a control of every aspect of human life. And this audience, hopefully ignorantly, was chanting Green New Deal. Did it twice in the portion of the thing that I listened to. So I want to get at today not what's so wrong with Bernie Sanders or Ilhan Omar, but I want to talk about how did we get here? How do we get to a place in 2019 in America that a Democrat socialist is a serious contender for president? He can produce crowds of the size if you watch the video, you see it was a very big audience. How did we get here to where you have someone running for the presidency who's promising to eliminate all college debt, make college free, pay for your health care? What Bernie Sanders, he may use a friendly sounding term like democratic socialism because that makes it sound nicer. That's not really the evil of socialism, it's democratic socialism. What Bernie Sanders would do if he won the presidency and put in place the policies he wanted to have, America would be gone. You might say that's a little bit of hyperbole, don't you think? No. If he got his way, if he got everything he wanted, the freedom of America would be gone. Our ability to live in comfort, because we have actual access to affordable energy that allows us to keep our homes warm in the winter and cool in the summer. Our ability to travel freely because we have cars to be eliminated by the Green New Deal. Can't have cars. A lot of talk about no need for people to have private cars. Certainly can't have airplanes. You can't be flying in airplanes. They pollute. This is a complete, and I'm not using the word lightly, communist takeover of America in the form of a very friendly sounding Democrat socialist. And I want to talk about how we got here in the context of talking about cultural Marxism. Now, many of you, I can tell you from the emails I get and the comments I get, I know that many of our listeners are very, very well informed. You are not people who are just fly-by-night political types, seriously well informed, seriously concerned about America, seriously patriotic and loving the idea of America and the idea of liberty upon which America was founded. I know you're serious patriots, and so you've probably heard the term cultural Marxism. But I want to walk through these ideas just to get you to understand the reason Ilhan Omar is able to stand on a stage and tout and get just an enormous amount of excitement out of the audience by claiming we're going to take over the healthcare system. We're going to make healthcare free for all. We're going to take over the education system. And she didn't go on this plank, but she said she endorses Bernie Sanders, who does do this. All college is free. All college debt your loan is immediately eliminated, is fixed, is taken away. It is simply, this is a person in the form of Bernie Sanders telling you he will take complete control of America. He will take complete control of the economic system. He'll take complete control of the education system, of housing. Oh, his plans for housing scare you to death. But I want to talk about cultural Marxism, what that term means. People throw around the term cultural Marxism in a little bit of a cavalier way sometimes. And I want to be sure to get at, because it helps us understand how we got here. So we had Karl Marx, of course, and he and his buddy Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Karl Marx actually thought that once he and Engels, pretty much two unemployed people, never did a thing in their lives, but two of them wrote this Communist Manifesto, they thought that once they exposed how the proletariat, the working people, were being repressed by the bourgeoisie, the middle class, the property owners, there would be a spontaneous uprising around the world that the working people of the world would lock arms, would unite, would explode in revolution, that once the Communist Manifesto is out there, that people all over the world would say, oh my gosh, we've been repressed, we stand up, we want communism, we stand up, we're going to be the workers' revolution, and we want, the first step is socialism. This is what he thought. Karl Marx thought would happen. Reality dawned on him and his followers very quickly when they realized that actually the only place where the socialist idea, the idea of the government owning the means of production, the government owning everything, the only places it was working was where there was a massive, violent, repressive takeover by the small cadre of socialists and communists leading it and forcing it on the people. The people were not interested. The people became victimized, is what happened. So you had the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917. You had, Stalin very early on involved there, not at the time, but shortly afterwards. By the way, you get to the Tehran Conference, 1943, Stalin's been in charge for whatever number of years it was, and Stalin had killed millions of his own people. Interestingly, by the way, one thing in Bret Baier's book, because Stalin first talked about how he loved Marxism and he wanted to help the people, lift the people up, he had people shocked. I mean, his followers could not believe that Stalin, this great guy, was killing his own people. He's supposed to love the people. How could he be doing this? But what dawned on the lovers of the theory of socialism and communism under the Communist Manifesto was that nobody really wanted this idea, and the only way to impose this idea, the only way to force this idea into cultures and countries in this world was pure, brute, military, violent force. And this shocked people, people who thought that Marx and Engels had figured everything out. We're all going to be free, it's going to be wonderful, and everything's going to be fair and wonderful and great. They could not believe the idea that the most communist successes that occurred were not spontaneous uprisings, but in terms of one author, the point of a bayonet. Even in Russia, there was not a exuberant spread of a workers' revolt and workers' rights that spread communism from Russia into the Eastern Bloc countries. It was, again, pure brute force. So along comes the thinkers who can't believe people can't see the brilliance of socialism and communism and having the government own everything, the people own everything, and just shocked by the idea that actually what was happening was government became horribly repressive, that the capitalist system was standing out as a beacon of freedom and opportunity and growth for people, and they want to find a way, these followers of Marx want to find a way to force this idea of socialism into Western cultures rooted in liberty, rooted in freedom, rooted in free markets. So the idea of, and the entity, you heard this referred to, I'm sure, in this show and other shows, the Frankfurt School, which was just, it was a school in a university in Germany, the Goethe University in Germany, and it was a Frankfurt School. These are left-wing academicians. These are Gramsci, Marcuse, Adorno, Horkheimer, Brecht. These people were socialists who came up with the idea that maybe Marx just got it wrong, that maybe instead of forcing, or maybe not, instead of expecting people to get the brilliance of socialism and immediately throw off the proletariat and immediately demand the socialists take over their countries, which wasn't happening anywhere. They thought, well, okay, instead, maybe we have to introduce the idea, we have to soften the ground, we have to soften till the earth, soften the ground in these free countries by takeover, and their term was the long march through the institutions of the West. The long march through the institutions of the West. What these radical left-wing socialists / communists, and don't get hung up in some prissy distinction between socialism and communism. It's the same thing. Socialism is the economic system communists use. Communists have just managed to take over a country, so you can't get rid of them. And this is why Bernie Sanders thinks he can sell democratic socialism, because we're going to vote it in. But believe me, if we vote it in, we'll never get rid of it. But back to what these Frankfurt School people did. they decided to do a broad-based attack on all the traditional Western institutions in Western society, particularly in America. So universities, the media, publishing, motion pictures, church, family, the entire idea was to weave its way into Western culture, especially in America, and through the planting of academicians, people who were leaders and thought leaders, people who would emerge in communities as political leaders, people who invaded academia at all sorts of levels, not just colleges, but colleges was the main thing, graduate schools, and on down from the high schools down into now it's in the kindergarten level, the way we think about things, was the idea of bringing about the destruction of the belief in the idea of America, the ideas of Western civilization, the ideas upon which America was founded, the ideas of the freedom of the individual, the ideas of the importance of the church and place of God in society, that was a source of morals and a source of law and a source of respect, the idea of families who are intact, who teach their children these values. So you spread Western civilization, Western culture through families. It was this Frankfurt School, cultural Marxism, was the idea, if you can destroy the belief in, the respect for Western culture, Western civilization, through pushing and pushing and pushing against, through cultural arguments, and they attack things like the ideas of national sovereignty as being, and look what we're talking about the border today. The left is arguing, who needs national sovereignty? Why do you have to have borders? What difference does it make? Sexual mores, they actually talked about pushing the idea. Instead of having intact family units in some sense of propriety based on the teachings of many faiths, including Christianity and Judaism, abandoning sexual mores, turning women against men, turning people, cultivating a victim class. This is what the left is and creates, a perpetual victim class, encouraging people to see their culture, their country, America, as a cultural oppressor. So you had women, racial minorities, immigrants, homosexuals, gays, the LGBTQ movement, Muslims. The whole idea was to implant this cultural Marxism, implant in the minds of Americans the idea that you are oppressed, that America is a bad place. It has a history of repression. It's a horrible country that has done so much harm to the world, and what you're doing is undermining, you're tearing America out at the roots in the minds of many people. We were not alert to it in this country. We didn't have sufficient awareness in academia, in our movies, in our cultures. Churches were a part of it. This is exactly Soros. George Soros today is part of funding this ongoing cultural Marxism in this country. This weeding away, this destruction of, this challenging, the intellectual challenging and mockery and derision, mocking the idea of America being a good country and mocking the idea of America's foundations. This has been ongoing since this Frankfurt School got the idea planted in America, and the anti-American leftists in this country have taken up these ideas of cultural Marxism, destroying the love of America, the reverence for the ideas that founded America, the reverence for the idea of Constitution and the rule of law, and the notion of the primacy of the family in the country, and the primacy of morals rooted in the Bible, the primacy of churches as having a significant place in our country, in the institutions of our country, and shaping ideas and values. The whole idea was, by post-World War II, cultural Marxism had a wide-ranging agenda of, and I'm going to read you this language from one piece, agenda of destruction, aimed to destroy the family, denying the specific roles of the father and mother, advocating the teaching of sex and homosexuality to children, mobilization of women as revolutionaries against men through aggressive feminism, large-scale immigration to abolish national identity, dependency on the state, and so you have large government programs with endless and growing dependency on the government, state benefits, control of the media. What we've been watching in our lifetimes is the ongoing push of the cultural Marxism that started back in the Frankfurt School with the idea when the depressed followers of Marx realized, wow, no one really likes this idea of socialism. So once you have society so divided, as the Marxists have done in this country, the cultural Marxism Marxists who have cultivated a sense of suspicion, victimhood, resentment. This has become what the cultural Marxists started with the Frankfurt School, has become today's Democrat Party mission, today's Democrat Party platform. There is no longer any distinction. What the left does in this country, through Bernie Sanders, through other Democrat leaders, through the way they write their speeches, to the arguments they make in Congress, it is the utter destruction of America. And that, my friends, is what is on the ballot in 2020. This is the reason the small amount of sanity left on the American public, on the American left, those people are kind of excited about Biden, even though Joe Biden, as a presidential candidate, even though they can't remember what state he's in, he makes repeated, not just occasional blunder, forgot what day it was or forgot what city I'm in, repeated blunders. He's not doing well in terms of keeping his act together, but he's still polling well because many Democrats in this country are starting to realize that the agenda of the Democrat Party in Washington is never, ever to unite America. It is never to encourage the ideas of America's founding. It's never to encourage rule of law and limited government and personal responsibility and self-reliance and the American spirit and free enterprise. The left has become the leaders of the cultural Marxism in this country. The Democrat Party is the spearhead of that in this country. So when you listen to Ilhan Omar ranting and raving about everything the government should provide for free, the way socialists always sell their mission to take complete control of a country and a culture and a society and a people, they sell it by saying, we want to take care of you. We want to help you. We realize you need our help. You can't possibly make it on your own. And so they sell their complete tyranny they have in mind with a message of, we care. We want to help. We see you're needy. We want you to realize we recognize life isn't fair. Look at all these people around you, these groups around you that all hate you. You are a victim. You're marginalized. Nobody cares about you. And the only way you can get what you really deserve is if you get on board with the Democrat Party that will indeed, my friends, take complete control over everything in this country. We are looking at, if you had a Bernie Sanders presidency, and I am not exaggerating, I don't say this lightly, you're looking at the destruction of the very idea of freedom in America. That's what's on the ballot in 2020.